Hello, everybody. Welcome to ITIF webinar AR/VR in Classrooms, the roadmap to widespread adoption. My name is Juan Londoño, and I am ITIF's augmented and virtual reality policy analyst. And today I have the privilege to be alongside an amazing group of panelists and speakers. Before I introduce them, though, I would like to set up the stage for the conversation. Immersive technology has shown tremendous potential as a teaching tool. Across the United States, universities and schools have started rolling out the tech and have found that using AR/VR in their teaching processes has led to more knowledge retention, increased student engagement, and better student outcomes. However, the rollout of these technologies in schools could face various challenges, like the digital divide, concerns over ergonomics or accessibility, or simply a lack of knowledge of how these technologies work. These issues could potentially enact a barrier that could make the adoption process of AR/VR tech in schools inefficient, unsafe, or just hold the technology back from achieving its true educational potential. That is why today I am pleased to be joined by a pair of trailblazers who are paving the path for educators who wish to incorporate AR/VR into their teaching processes. First, we have Dr. Musina Morris. Musina is the academic program director and assistant professor of chemistry at Morehouse College. She won the 2021 Vulcan Teaching Award of Excellence and launched her advanced inorganic chemistry course in virtual reality in the spring of 2021 in a digital twin campus created by Victory XR on the Engage platform. She's a pioneer in this space, as chemistry content in VR is limited to almost non-existent. She believes that VR provides a pathway to create inclusion through immersive education, vocational rehabilitation services, and therapeutic experiences. Thank you, Musina.
Thank you for having me, Juan. I'm so grateful to be here.
We also have Kai Fraser joining us today. Kai has worked in education for over 20 years and strived to be a good steward of students' dreams, voices, creativity, and their future. She created Kai XR to foster a culture of innovation. Over the last few years, she and her team have built Kai XR into an all-in-one platform for educators to expand student imaginations while they learn 21st century skills to prepare them to succeed in the future. Thanks for joining us, Kai.
Thanks for having me, Juan.
So before we start the panel discussion, I would like to remind our audience that everyone watching the webinar to subscribe to ITIF's YouTube channel and to turn on notifications so you never miss an event. Also, you can submit your questions using the Slido link below, or you can also find it on the ITIF event webpage. Start off our discussion, Dr. Musina Morris. I would like to ask a question to you. You have incorporated virtual reality and digital twins into your teaching process. Can you walk us through what was your process behind that decision making, and when did it click to you that you had to adopt immersive technology? And how do you think these tools have changed your teaching style?
So the impetus for actually using immersive technologies in the classroom really happened as I was implementing VR for our program called Upward Bound. So I was the science research coordinator. It was the summer after the world had shut down in 2020. And I discovered Victory XR, whose content was already loaded into the headsets and tethered to the next generation science standards. And I was responsible for teaching chemistry, biology, physics, and engineering technology to students who were in rural communities. And I couldn't think of a better way to engage them than to use virtual reality, which was different than what we had already conceptualized. We were doing robotics already, we were doing coding and those kind of things, but them learning in an immersive environment was something that was new and we hadn't used it before. Fast forward to the fall when I was the department chair of chemistry, we were trying to make sure that our retention rates were still remaining consistent, that students weren't dropping out of the major. Chemistry is a very challenging subject. It's the second hardest subject matter in the world. Students require a lot of courses in order to finish in-depth physics, in-depth math, in-depth biology. So these students they're like, chemistry is like the piano of the sciences. But if you miss a step, you basically are starting all over. You're adding another year to your curriculum. And so it was really important for us to make sure that students stayed persisting in their major and that they stayed engaged. And the way that we saw to do this was Victory XR had demoed for us a synchronous learning campus. So the first one was an asynchronous platform. But this next one was a synchronous learning campus, which was so important because our students needed presence as well. So they were in the classroom with us. We could see everything that they were doing. We made virtual reality the classroom for the students. Fast forward, students didn't have many learning losses. We didn't lose any students. Students weren't off track. No one dropped the courses, and we actually saw student achievement increase by 11.9% during that semester. So we've been going ever since. We've done over 37 virtual reality courses now, but the impetus for it was definitely to prevent learning loss, to prevent students from taking courses over, and for increasing their matriculation. We didn't want that to happen. So it was a good way for them to persist in the major.
Wow, that's fantastic testimony. Thank you so much. I'm going to pivot to Kai. And Kai, in your experience as an immersive learning content provider, what do you think sets immersive learning tool apart from other devices and digital tools like computers or tablets? Do you think it's possible for AR/VR tech to become a mainstream tool for teaching as these other technologies?
Yeah, of course, I think it's possible for immersive tech to be a mainstream tool for teaching. However, it can't be just tech dictated. It's going to take a true partnership with the educators, the students, and their parents, who are commonly forgotten about when it comes to rolling out this tech. Without that true collaboration, we leave out a really important voice, which are the subject matter experts themselves, who have a lot of input on the pedagogy, the actual students themselves. And then, I work with middle school and elementary classrooms and just the day-to-day classrooms. I think when you're in a tech lab building things, it's very different when you're actually in a classroom and you're seeing classroom disruptions and school bells and quick 90-minute or 60-minute, even 30-minute bell cycles, things like that. Completely different when you're thinking about how to simple things like how do you take out the tech, how do you package the tech back up, how do you do safety protocols in the school, how do you train kids. These are all things that are very commonly overlooked when it comes to rolling out the tech in the classroom. And that's why I'm a huge champion for that partnership and collaboration with the subject matter experts in the schools.
I agree so much with what Kai just said, simply because professional development is something that is ongoing. It is something that you have to really have in place in order to adopt any type. In order to get mass adoption, you have to train the teachers, but you
Yeah.
can't give it to them as if it's another thing that they have to learn and another mandate. It has to be something that is going to unlock curiosity for them, that's going to bring joy of learning to them, and then they can pass that joy on to the students. So professional development is so important. And it's the small things that you really don't think about, just how to be present in this new technological space, how to appear as if you do know while you're also learning with the students that you're teaching. It's so many different layers to it, but professional development is definitely key.
Yeah, I want to pull on that thread on what Kai and Messina have mentioned. It's, when I was doing some research on this topic, and when I did my recent report on R&D priorities for the US for education and AR/VR based education, something I found is when we incorporated computers in classrooms, common challenge was training educators, getting them prepared to not only be proficient in using the tech and knowing how to use it, but also how to use it in a way that was pedagogic, like just in the pedagogy and methodology, and how like incorporate this as a teaching tool. So from your experience, I'm gonna start off with Kai. How can schools prepare teachers for this introduction of AR/VR? How can we make sure that they're properly trained and this stuff does not become a burden of like I need to now not only teach and grade, but now I need to train to use these tools.
Yeah, the elephant in the room for a lot of this is that schools do not exist for the convenience of teachers. So, although it's uncomfortable sometimes to learn these new skills, it's really important. But I think something that um, being on the outside looking in, one thing that people miss is the actual culture in the schools and how to make sure we're being respectful to this rollout to the realities of everyday school. So one of the things we start with before we even start with the technology, because I don't think technology is the first step. I think it's having the conversations, informing the teachers, some of those things first before you actually touch the tech. But we talk about the vulnerability it takes to be able to roll out these technologies. So you as a teacher may not be the leader. It may be a collaborative flipped classroom where the teachers and the students are learning together. And that is very different than traditional teaching. It's also, when you think about being in classroom as a teacher myself, it really comes down to your classroom management. But if you're not used to classroom, like a digital classroom management, that's very different. So it's really, for me, it starts with having conversations about digital classroom management, being 21st century educators, and then being able to have that vulnerability. Once we talk about all of that, we can go into the technology. And one of the things that I can't go into a single school without seeing character charts on the wall. So, at this school, we are trustworthy, or we're innovators, or things like that. I never see that when it comes to applying the tech. So we really have to get our teachers and the students in the mindset to say, what does it take to be a digital citizen? Once we get all of that, we start to roll the tech out for them. And that may be something as simple as the questions we get are like, how do I charge the headset? How do I store the headset? How do kids not break the headset? So we let the kids and the students ask lots of questions first. And then, I'm trying to speak to all the platforms, but biasly, I'm thinking about KaiXR. It's a little bit easier to roll it out when the platform is built thinking of the classroom. So, for example, for KaiXR, if you're in a classroom and you're doing a classroom lesson, it may have things like, here's your warm up before you get started. Here's your actual activity. Here's your discussion question. Here's your share out. So we found that it's easier to respect the flow of the classroom, and how do we incorporate the technology to be an addition and not just here's a new tech, here's what's happening. And that's what I mean by being a very tech dictated world. So, we don't, when we're working with kids, we don't just jump into the tech first. We don't jump into the lesson first. We have to play on context clues and things like that. So there may be some learning before the tech even comes out to really get the full benefit of using that technology. And then, of course, after the tech, where are those processing questions and things like that? So I'm a big advocate of respecting the pedagogy that we have and finding great ways to incorporate the tech that enhances the classroom and gets to those benefits that we really go to immersive technology for.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to extend this question to Lucina. I think I would love to know, like, you've had colleagues that have told you, like, look, I would like to do something similar to what you do at Morehouse, but I'm just intimidated by the tech, and they don't even know, because then they have to get the headsets themselves to train. And how do you think we can help teachers navigate this complex environment?
So usually I tell people, you just reach out to me, because I'm going to be there in the trenches with you. So I do a lot of professional development for educators, both in-service and pre-service educators, college, higher ed, K-12, getting them to understand, what does metaversive teaching and learning mean as an active learning strategy? What does it look like, and how can we implement it? One of the things that we did with our charter schools, so I'm in the Department of Education now, so I switched from chemistry to education because it gave me a larger lens by which to look at all of what we were doing across disciplines, because my program isn't just in chemistry, it is in all disciplines, both the humanities as well as the sciences and business. And I wanted to make sure that I was looking at the pedagogical approach and making sure that I was putting some solid content behind it and strategy. But one of the things that we did with one of our lab schools, is a K-12 charter school, and we worked with middle school educators. One of the things that always happen when new technologies or emerging technologies come out that we want to implement in the classroom is that teachers get a mandate and it comes from the top down, or it's like, oh, this is a great pedagogy for the students, so we need to be more student centered. And we think about from the bottom up, like looking at the students. No one really thinks about the educator, and the educator is really usually the only consistent force in the lives of these students. And so what we ended up doing was, first, like Kai said, the conversations have to happen. But the second thing was to let them sit with the technology. And that means that giving them no expectation of having to come up with curriculum around the device or around the technology that was being used. We use the MetaQuest 2 headset for virtual reality, so we're in a completely immersive environment. But when we worked with this particular school, we had students, the teachers work on mindfulness practice first. So they didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was learn to sit in stillness and go within and like just be in the space. Once they mastered that, and we started looking at well-being of the educator in this technology as a way to improve student achievement, then teachers were like, oh, we love it. It can be used for health and wellness. Oh, that's great. I could use this as a strategy for discipline for my students. Instead of, telling them to leave the room, I could use this as another strategy. So they started brainstorming and thinking of ways in which it could be used. And then we started talking about curriculum and approaches to how they could use it in the classroom. But they were ready for it then. And it gave them agency over, oh, the ideas are starting to form. This is what I want to see. And this is how we can approach it and how we can tether it back to the student learning outcomes. All of that is very important in this scenario. You don't want to like mandate that teachers do it. You want them to really organically understand the necessity for active learning in a virtual environment or integrating synchronous learning spaces and why it's important. Why is real-time 3D technology the next wave and the next iteration of how students will learn? We take for granted that our students are digital natives or that technology is just intuitive. And in a lot of ways, they don't even know how to use technology appropriately. And so we have to train them. And instead of seeing I call them the connected student, we call them digital natives too, but these connected students as subject matter experts in technology, we need to see them as learning as well, that they are still learning, that they are still being groomed and they're still growing. And so appropriate use and thinking about the ethical and moral ways in which it's going to be used with integrity is really important. And that's across the board with AR, VR, but also other new emerging technologies. So when we start having conversations about Gen AI and all of that, you start thinking about the ethical implications of the work. But in the end, it all starts with how do you get them to appropriately use the technology for the good of what they need to learn.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to pull a thread of something you said at the start, and especially when you're talking about teaching in rural areas. And the reality with immersive tech is that it requires a lot of computational power, broadband consumption, and as you mentioned, having some level of technical literacy. The pandemic, I think, has shown us that as beneficial all digital learning tools are, there's an existing digital divide that could widen if schools just go into like tech-based learning. From your experience, how do you think schools and educators can ensure that rollout of AR VR narrows the gap instead of widening it? And how do you think schools in rural or underserved areas could realistically adopt this technology if they do not have access to high-speed internet to download gigabytes worth of content?
So I have been sitting and thinking about this for a long time because a lot of the students that I work with over the summer that are part of that Upward Bound program, and yes, I've been in this trenches for 11 years and I'm still going with it, but they live in rural areas and they don't have access to great connectivity all the time. And so their experiences can be disjointed. And what I have found out is making sure that we're having conversations with legislators, making sure that we're having conversations with those who are members of tech companies that are in logistics, that are really rolling out new network connectivities for these particular towns and letting them know what the problems are. The interesting thing is HBCUs, majority of them are broadband deserts. Like we don't have good access to connectivity and students come on campus with more than 5 devices that they want to connect. My workaround was to partner with telecommunications companies and to provide hotspots where we could connect device where we wouldn't be also burdening our own servers because we just don't have capacity in that way. other areas don't really have that, but there's so much that can be learned even in the creative space of developing for this technology, developing outcomes for better connectivity. I think all of those conversations are relevant. And so I would urge educators and school systems to lean on the technology, telecommunications industries, the big tech companies. I know that the partnerships seem very unconventional. But what I have found was that by creating these partnerships of purpose, I've been able to provide a higher quality of education to my students. And so it is an unnatural kind of partnership. So we have partnerships with Qualcomm and Southern Company, Meta, T-Mobile, the National Science Foundation. We have found a way to connect all of the dots and say that this is kind of like the gameplay. You need to have these partnerships, or you need to at least have the ear of these people to be able to get the things that you need and the ball rolling. And so we leverage the power of our ability as academics to grant fund, to really be able to not pass cost on to our students, and not to increase that digital divide, because lack of access to the technology because of socioeconomic means is a great reason why there's so many people that don't have it. So we try to limit that by using our brand as a way to partner with different tech companies and telecommunications companies.
Oh, that's great, and it's great to hear. And that you students have a big social entrepreneur like you are. I think the fact that you reach out and taking these efforts, it's been incredibly beneficial for them. And Kai, I want to extend this question to you too. Like, through your experience in this business, I imagine sometimes you might face pushback of like, look, we don't have good internet. How can we bring these devices into classrooms? And how have you tackled that logistical quest and barrier in some way?
Yeah, so my background as being a classroom educator, I taught in a lot of schools that had very questionable Wi-Fi, and we didn't have the best devices. So that's all I know. That's my background. So for the first 5 years of building the company, being in the Silicon Valley area, there's Wi-Fi on the sidewalks. So when a lot of people are building the tech, they never even think about the reality of being in a broadband desert. And the unfortunate part is the kids who are in those broadband deserts are the ones who are usually in need of the most of these technologies because they are really life changing. So for me, in the earlier stages of building KaiXR, it was kind of unpopular to have a super accessible platform. A lot of people were building for a particular headset, or they had their eye on a headset, and we always built for accessibility. So that meant that whether you had a smartphone or a tablet or your Chromebook or even a VR headset, you could still have access to the technologies. Either in an immersive way or a non-immersive way. The cool thing about introducing some of these metaverse technologies on a laptop or a tablet is that means that it opens the door to younger kids to start using the technology earlier. So I'm just leaving a school right before this, and we have kindergartners using our metaverse technologies because they're accessing them on a tablet. So we've always built for the reality of my classrooms, which was you may come in there, and even if you have the device, the Wi-Fi may not be working, and with that, it's just a brick. So what are the other things that you can do? So maybe it's having a teaching lesson that is maybe 75% teaching and using other skills. And then the last part, the 25% is the headset or the technology. So really being mindful that even if you had the best Wi-Fi, like in my experience being in a classroom, you can have the best Wi-Fi, you can have the best devices, you can get the tech and everything's dead. So somebody didn't charge it the night before. So these are just realities that we see in a regular classroom. But I can say that we've always taken accessibility to kept it close to the chest is one of our priorities. And I always encourage other tech companies to think about, the realities of a classroom. And even more, I encourage tech companies and builders to visit classrooms so they can see really what the reality is in these rural areas, but also see the excitement it brings to kids to be able to use those technologies. One small thing I'll say is we have a makerspace on KaiXR. and the kids are building on very small circular tracts of land. And sometimes we get like, well, why isn't it bigger? Bigger takes more bandwidth. So we've made things like that. Sometimes when the kids are doing virtual field trips, those are 360 field trips. So people say, well, why isn't it more interactive for this part? Because if it's more interactive, it takes a lot more, a higher hardware device. So we've always built with all these limitations in mind, and kids have a really good, jumping off point to be able to access these technologies. And I think by building like that and keeping the reality of our customer in mind, we were able to take a lot of folks off the sidelines and bring them into these spaces. And I'm a huge champion of bringing all these diverse voices to the front lines, because when they're there, we get the real metaverse that we deserve, and the kids are really leading the way.
Thank you so much. Before we move to another question, I want to remind our audience to submit their questions to Slido. We're starting to see some questions rolling in for the Q&A, which we'll address later, but I wanted to remind everyone that the Slido link is down below so you can submit your questions. In Kai, you have mentioned something I think very important as you talked about that first conversation, like making sure that educators know what this technology can and cannot do. And I think it's like overall, I think a major pain point for AR, VR in general, not just in education, is that there's a general lack of knowledge or awareness what the technology really is, what it can really do, and what its limitations are. And this can become troublesome for schools that might be doing like this big investments in procurement, or they want to make the jump, but they might be hesitant because they can't really assess if the hardware, software they're acquiring is adequate or is this cost efficient. How do you think like schools can navigate this transition period where they can make the jump but not resulting in wasteful spending?
Yeah, I think that we don't make it easy for them. So I'll say that first. I think we can make it a lot easier for them. One of the big learnings in the earlier days of KaiXR is we were so focused on building the product that we only knew how to talk products. So when it came down to talking to teachers and educators, we're talking about, oh, it's device agnostic and WebXR, blah, blah, all these different things. And they're like, does it teach the kid? It's like, can the kids learn? So it's really having to be, so that's why it takes a true partnership. So they want to know, is it standards aligned? It's worth the investment if it's standards aligned. They want to know, does it increase engagement? Does it deepen learning? Will they have more time on numeracy and digital literacy? So really having to put back my educator hat on to understand, like, here are the things that we can do with these technologies, and there may be other things that other tech can do. And I think the more we talk plainly about the solutions we offer and how they can be beneficial, then educators are able to make good choices on what tech they are building. We have, I think one thing that people don't always think about when they think about immersive technologies and VR, they always go to the headset first, which is great. We love headsets, but there are other ways to get to a non-immersive, gaming or non-immersive content they can get to that doesn't involve a headset. So a lot of people think, oh, we don't have headsets, we aren't a good candidate for metaverse technologies, and that's not true either. So once again, stressing that some schools we have some schools, one of the schools I work with, they've been able to use one company and buy 60 headsets for each school. It's really hard to get 60 headsets. That basically breaks down to like 2 headset carts or maybe 3 headset carts they can bring around. So if you are interested in having the kids have multiple touch points, maybe even every like once a week touch points, that may not be your best option. So you may have to start with non-immersive technology to get the kids acclimated with it. And sometimes it's a bit of a learning curve sometimes. So maybe the headsets aren't the first thing you want to go to. Maybe I have younger kids all the time, maybe kids who are in 3rd grade and their teachers say, I want to get headsets. And we tell them, hey, maybe headsets aren't the best way to start right now for these young kids, but here's some other options. So I think it also takes a little bit of responsibility as us, the providers, to have conversations with the educators and see if we are the best solution. So I recommend different solutions all the time for educators, because I can hear what they need, and we may not be the best for them. So I think it just has some of those open conversations. And then, of course, we also want our educators to do their research too, so they can think about what's out there and what may be good for their schools.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to do the shameless plug here. Like in that report I mentioned on the R&D priorities, I think that's something that the U.S. needs, and Department of Education would do a great service to school systems, and investing in more of that research. I think that schools could have a hopefully like a one-stop resource of studies that mention exactly that. Like your necessity is this, you might like this software, this type of software might be better fit, or this type of hardware is a better fit in order to
Yeah.
prevent schools from jumping in and say, oh yeah, we need 60 headsets, but we're gonna just use them once a week to do a virtual field trip that could have been done in a 360 video, and you probably didn't
Yeah.
need the highest end hardware.
Yeah.
I always
Uh,
tell I always tell people, build what you want to see. Like it might seem like that's so far-fetched, but the technology, we're at a time where we've never been ever, where we have the ability to allow our voices to be heard in this technological space. And so when I have real creative and innovative teachers, I always tell them, what do you want to see? Let's brainstorm. Let's talk about like how we can integrate it. But when it comes to being in the headset, people ask me all the time, like, so do students at Morehouse just walk around in headsets all the time? And I'm like, absolutely not. We're still very much a residential program. Like, to be honest, 30 minutes is enough. If you craft your lesson, 30 minutes is enough. And we're talking about 18 to 23-year-old young Black men that attend Morehouse College. So and that's them. Now, I will leave them in their headset and let them continue on, because there's a lot of times that they want to continue to tinker and play and explore. And I'm like, and I'm out. But for younger kids, even 15 minutes is enough. I don't think that it takes a lot. I think crafting the experience takes longer than actually being in the experience. But if the statistics are what they are and engagement increases by 40%, and you're able to get more done in less time, then you should be able to get back some quality time, some parts of your life that you needed, by unlocking that learning faster for some students. But then there's still the issue of accessibility in terms of those people with cognitive and physical impairments and disabilities. So adoption is also halted because there's not yet, there are rules that are being developed and there are guidelines that are being strategized and people are having conversations about it. But there's not really a whole lot of information about how we can implement this to a student who has low vision, or a student that has that is hard of hearing, or students that have physical impairments and maybe cannot use the joysticks as control, or they don't have hands that can be tracked. Or I have 5 sons. One of my sons has autism spectrum disorder and moderate support needs. And just the whole concept of multiple layers of moving the joysticks, that's not happening for him. So having somebody that's paired with him that can move him along in the scenarios is vital and key. And so it's many different layers of what accessibility means and what we still need to work on. So that's why I tell people, there's no time like the present to put your head together and build the metaverse. And even when it comes to, oh, we don't have a headset, like Kai said, it's a brick. But when we have old headsets that don't work anymore, I make students take them apart and tinker with it and figure out what the inner workings were. What were the lenses? What were the, like, how did they come up with these specifications and how did they build it? Because the hardware is just as important as the actual experience that is taking place. So there's so many different layers of being a part of this widespread adoption that needs to take place, that we need people that have that knowledge of not just the hardware, but the software, and not just app building and world creation and coding, but also how to market it, how to monetize on it, how to preserve your intellectual property in these spaces. What do we do with all this data? Because the data footprints are insane. And how do we really see that it translates to higher student learning achievements and engagement? Yes, it's fun, but is fun also equaling increased learning? And so it's like, how do you really come up with the standardized method of assessment in this space too, is really, really important. And those things still need to be very much so worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think as you mentioned, it's very neat seeing, and funny enough, it's not only the education sphere. Whenever I hold a conversation with people working in workforce development, they say like people don't want to take this off, and like I hope that when this device has become more mainstream, have people learning for fun, or like training for fun, or going back to curriculum because they have their own headsets at home that
Yes.
said, that class was so fun, I just want to redo that again. Uh, at home with my own device. Hopefully, when we get to that point where everyone has one in their own household.
And if I could just piggyback off that one of the things that we didn't expect of our students is because we made it so they could maybe use a headset in school or a tablet, because we made it so accessible, they could take their tablets and their smartphones home. So we actually see kids that are working on it at home, and when they work on it at home, their parents get involved. So it makes really stronger community learning that we didn't anticipate. But sometimes they have the headset in school, they don't have them at home. Maybe they have Wi-Fi at school, but not at home. So making it so it runs on a smartphone was a whole different, I mean, it opened so many doors for them to really take that learning and extend it, and really dig into their 21st century skills. It's kind of like double time now. So as they get ready to go to the holiday break that's coming up, we're giving them makerspace challenges they can do while at home. So we're seeing that, something we never expected, but really excited to see.
I
Yeah,
love that. That's amazing, Kai, that y'all are doing that, because to be honest, it takes just one device. That's what I always say. Like, I always go back to the story of when I'm about to date myself. When we had one Apple computer in the entire school of like 500 kids, that was before there was any kind of connectivity. You just had the computer. And so everybody in the school had an opportunity to be exposed to computing in that way, right? And sometimes we feel like it takes so much to be able to expose students to it. But I mean, a field trip where they just get to come and tinker with the devices, get to try it on. We just did a demo activation where students like from all across campus just got to be in the MetaQuest 3. I didn't care what you were learning. I didn't care what you were doing. But the fact that you got to experience it, because then it makes it more real and tangible. It's not just a commercial. You know what I mean? It's not just something that is for people who have like a whole lot of money. You actually see it and envision yourself having it. And not just being consumers of that product, but figuring out like how to produce, how can I unlock different areas of my life where I could improve. And like you said, bringing back the joy of learning. Just what is learning, and what's lifelong learning, and what's curiosity, and how can we see each other in the process of this, and how can we support each other. And those 21st century skills of collaboration and creativity, communication and critical thinking are so necessary. But I always add a fifth one: compassion, because without a human lens, without humanity at the core of what we're doing, then it's meaningless. If it's going to be more harmful than it is good, then throw it away, because what we really need are people to be more empathetic, more emotionally intelligent, and more able to work together to solve complex problems. So that's what the technology should empower us to do.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on something that both Christina and Kai have mentioned a lot. And you've insisted on there's only like multiple layers of buy-in that need to happen to make this rollout successful. You have to have educators, you have school systems, parents, and students themselves. And I think something has become tricky to tackle is parents and policymakers have expressed a lot of concern about kids' screen times, especially at a younger age. And if we think about a rollout of this tech in K-12, I think some parents might have some whiplash of the idea of introducing kids to a technology that puts the screen mere inches away from their face and their eyes. So how do you think schools can navigate that tension as well? And what do you think, like, how can educators determine at what age is it appropriate to say, okay, the kids are ready to use AR, VR, and what do you think are the criteria that should be set in order to make that decision?
What's so interesting is that screen time is not just all screen time is not made equal. So when people start talking about screen time, if your child is just watching videos that are not enhancing their learning and they're not learning anything in any way, then that screen time is useless. But then also maybe that screen time is useful because they needed that moment to relax and just be in the moment in a creative space versus engaging in something. So I always say you have to really gauge what that screen time means. Kids are always like this. So if you worried about a VR headset being close to their eyes, I guarantee you that that VR headset is farther away than that tablet is, because kids are like this. I have 5 of them, so I know they are like this, looking at whatever they are looking at, and so it is still very close to their face. So if you are concerned about that part, I would be more concerned with the eye strain that's happening because they're not in a contained environment versus being in an environment where it's more contained and they're not looking out in their peripheral and looking at different things too. And their eyes are more gazed and fixated. And eye tracking studies can cover all of that. And you can figure out what the cognitive load is in these headsets versus on the phone, you really don't know. And so I think that, yes, it's something to be cautious about, but it's not something to throw the baby away with the bathwater about either.
Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, I can just small comments to piggybacking off Dr. Moore's. What we've done in building Kayak Star is we made sure they're doing virtual experiences. Most of them are about 5 minutes and under. And that's because we want them to watch it and then come out the headset or put the tablet down and then talk to each other about what they've seen. So we actually have discussion questions that go with it, maybe some think pair sharing, maybe some, you do something first, then you write down what you're seeing, or maybe you may sketch out. We have one, we call them learning adventures. We have one where they're in the solar system. They start off by first sketching all the planets they can think about. Then they go on the virtual field trip through the solar system. Then they correct their sketch based on what they saw. And then they go into the maker space and they can actually build the solar system out. So making sure we're breaking up that time too, because we do want kids to be able to talk to each other, collaborate both in physical spaces and in digital spaces as well.
Yeah, I think it's great for people to know also that, like, yeah, immersive learning, it's not just you're gonna just strap on the headset and that's it for 8 hours. I think the socialization aspect of it and like the follow up, it's often ignored. Like when this technology gets pitched, like, no, this is actually more than just strapping a screen a mere inches away. It's a whole holistic learning process that also has a lot of physical world learning too. So I see that we're almost up in time. So I want to make sure I want to get some of the good questions from the audience in. So one of the first questions people asked, and I think we can tie it into a lot of what we talked about, is, how can schools go about addressing possible mental and physical health issues that students may experience when using immersive tech in classrooms? I think especially, so we're talking in terms of accessibility, not everyone's going to process is the same, or their bodies are not going to be ready to tackle immersive learning. How do you think we can make this an equal feel and a safe experience for children?
I think for onboarding purposes in general, even with my students now, is making small iterative steps. You don't get in the headset and start moving around. I have a very kind of like iterative 5 minutes, we're going to do this. And then this is how we move in this space for the first week. If students are so eager to get in it or they've done VR before, usually they try to bypass my steps, but then they quickly back when they have that first experience of, kind of like motion sickness in the headset because they move too fast. But I found that if you do it very slowly and gradually and you increase your time by small amounts, then you get more out of it. So by the time my students have to actually do a complete lesson that may last 30 minutes, they've already worked their way up. And it takes a couple of weeks to get there. So you don't just jump into the technology at first. Another thing is mindfulness practice, sitting with the technology, literally. Like, I think there's so much to be said about just sitting with the technology and using it for health and wellness, for mindfulness practice. And there are many different applications, Trip VR, Helium, Psych. There's another one, Psych VR. Like, there's so many ones that you can use and access to just kind of get a mindfulness, a mental kind of like health check too. But then there's some fun physical stuff. So Supernatural and Fit XR and like all of the things that you can do. Beat Saber is still like a classic favorite. And I think that kids should move in this environment, right? Like they should be able to move around. But even when it comes to AR and augmented different spaces, like Pokemon Go was a big fan favorite, and it was a way that you could just, play and learn and explore the world around you. And I think that applications and things like that enhance movement, that create these muscle memory in students, that allow them to explore safely in these spaces is great, and great ways to do it.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback small off what Dr. Morris is saying. Before we put kids in a lot of experiences, whether it's with a headset or on a tablet or a non-immersive device, we usually have a conversation about what they're going to see and what they're going to experience. Using some context clues before they go into there, just having those discussions, they know what they're going to see. I have a pet peeve of people just giving people experiences without asking about their kind of background, mental health state, things like that. Example I'll give you is um, a lot of times in the earlier days of VR, it would be like, oh, check out this homelessness experience, or check out this being in prison experience, and check out, it's like you don't know what everybody's background is. So that may be very traumatizing for them and doesn't really put them in a good mental health space. So having those conversations are very important. And I'll also say giving them options of how they want to experience it. I went through one VR experience which was super like intense, and I started on a headset. I was like, I think I'll go look at the tablet now. I couldn't, or I'll take off the headphones or whatever to turn the sound down. So sometimes I give them options so they can feel what's comfortable for them. And then when it comes to physical health, we have kids from all different backgrounds, all different abilities. We've had kids that we've worked with cerebral palsy, and those 360 experiences, just having the headset on and moving them in a wheelchair is super helpful. We've had kids who are fully mobile and they don't want the headset on at all. They're like, I want to have it here first, or I want to have it in this way. So sometimes giving that agency and how they want to experience it, and having those conversations, and then afterwards having a discussion on how to process what they just saw. So when we see that, we see a lot stronger results.
It's so funny, Kai, that you just said that about the child that is mobile and just doesn't want to have. So it's interesting because we always give our students options. You can either come on your mobile device, you can be on your computer, your laptop, or you could be in the headset. So we give them options because people have different health conditions too. And so you just have to really be mindful of that. And so we give them options. I have a student has nothing, but just is technology adverse. Okay. And he is a soon to be educator. And I know he's moving into a future of work kind of situation where technology is going to have to be used. The interesting thing about this student is he understands his limitations. And so him advocating for himself, I allowed and welcomed because it was easier to hear what his hesitations were and then to work through them with him and not press him. And so now he has an affinity for the technology, but it wasn't always that way. So I think that allowing them, like Kai said, to gradually show up how they best feel comfortable. Yes, they're digital natives, but all of them don't want to be we thrust our students into technology during COVID. And they hated the computer. Kids who couldn't wait to come home and get on the computer couldn't stand it because we had them just sitting in front of it doing nothing, or just listening to somebody talk to them all day, or just keeping an account of attendance. Whereas now we're having to we're having to fix a whole lot of those that mindset where they're like technology adverse, where they're like, oh, I want to be off technology right now because it's been thrusted in their face. And so you have to really make sure that you're cognizant of the limitations, not just of the technology, but of the human being that is going to be using the technology, and honor their space in that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to pick another question for the audience. I think it's very on point. And, the immersiveness of AR VR, I think one of the hits is, it isolates you and creates this virtual world where you get to get immersed due to the all like sensory isolation of other senses. But that can be very difficult for homework, for example, where parents want to get involved and want to be with their child or help them do homework. And the question for the audience that goes, what are the ways in which schools can have parents support their kids when they're using immersive tech for homework? How can parents be involved in that learning process and and help and aid their kids that are doing immersive based homework at home?
Yeah, I can jump in for that. Immersive homework is so different. We usually the parents have not seen the technology before. They're not maybe as well versed. Sometimes they are, but the first thing that we tell parents is we remind them why we're using the technology. You know, we're growing those 21st century skills. So we want them to be creative and innovative and be able to, discuss these new technologies. So just how you talk to your kids when they're using the tech is super important. So sometimes, you'll hear like, no, that's wrong, do it again. So we tell them like, oh, what, how did you get that? Tell me your thought process through that. Questions like that, could you do it differently? Walk me through the steps it took. That really is super helpful for having them process, and even for the parents, it really sheds light on what the students are doing. We've had parents help with the homework and get so involved with it that they actually go back to school for tech degrees and things like that. So it's a really great opportunity to do that. And then we also, kids love to see their parents trying things out too. So, as a parent, don't be afraid to jump in a headset and see what they're doing. If you're love to Chrome stream things to your TV, you could have a headset and stream it to the TV as well and watch them and talk to them about what's happening. But lots of fun things. But I just always say don't ever assume it's a zero sum game when you're in the headset. So really just have that time to be open minded and think about what the kids are doing and have them share back out to you what they're experiencing.
Absolutely. You know what was so funny when you said that was I remember during when our first implementation, so it was our pilot semester. It was the spring of 2021. We're completely remote, so people are in their homes, right? And we had mailed the headsets to all the students. I had a parent that came in and she started yelling at this student. I know good and well you're not gaming and you're supposed to be in chemistry. Don't you have chemistry right now? Why are you? And he was like, mommy, he was like, mommy, and he couldn't get a word in. And he was like, I am in chemistry. And she was like, what? And so it was like, okay, we don't usually in college have to explain to parents, but this was a great experience to have to explain to the parent. And the parent ended up getting in the headset and experiencing what the child did and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe learning has changed so much. What am I going to do now that we're here? But really, that was such a wonderful learning experience. And I always tell parents, make sure that you're learning with your child, that you're bringing the joy of learning into your house. I call it opportunistic reality because it opens a whole new world of opportunity, not just for the child, the student, but the parent, for the educator, for the administrators, for other stakeholders in the community. It just really breeds a lifelong love of learning. And so what I found by being a part of this project was just that it renewed and restored my joy in the journey as an educator, which led to me rediscovering truths in my discipline that then led to an increased love of learning. And so I tell people all the time, it has the possibility, extended realities have the possibility of like just breeding joy that leads to truth, that leads to this love of learning and starting all over again for kids to rediscover what it really means to be curious. What does it really mean to really discover the world around you and about, in places that you didn't think that you could go and then to go. You know what I mean? It's like being a part of a living vision board that is coming to life for you. And so you get to chart your own path and your own course. So open up your mind to the possibilities that can be and dive in with your children. You don't have to know it all. The joy is in the not knowing.
Yeah, and I would say the kids love to see when their parents get to put the headsets on and then they become the teachers. So one of those skills, of pedagogy is that they can explain and teach back what they've learned. That's learning. So take it as an opportunity to, have for you as a parent to wear the headset and have your students to explain to you each step. And like I said, it just makes a huge difference. It's kind of like when, these metaverse technologies, it's a new type of literacy, it's digital literacy. And when you're working on literacy, a big part of that is like, the parents reading at home. It's not just the teachers reading to the kids, that the parents have to read at home. So when it's the parent, teacher, and student all working together and that trifecta is achieved, it really increases that digital literacy. So that's what we aim to see. So we love seeing kids using the tech at home for homework.
Yeah, kind of think like that point has happened to everyone that has had a headset before. At least in my case, like I can't wait to show it to all my family. And a lot of the stuff that comes in the demos I've shown my family, it's educational stuff. It's like, look, this is how the ISS works. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know like being a space like astronaut or like that, and this is actually how it looks like. And you're teaching them like. And then like they start learning the controls that have become like the norm. So like now that you press these buttons in most headsets, it means grab, and you can help kids teach older adults particularly to not be left behind and to make sure that they're also part of this transition to digital learning and the digital economy at large.
And it makes for some really cool dinner table conversations. As a teacher, that was a win to me when the parents came and like, we talked about it at dinner, because grandma likes to go to the space station too. So it's a cool multi-generational tool. So we love to see it.
I found it so wonderful that like my older generation, like my elders, like the grandparents, they were so excited because they were like, as a child, I could only dream that this was possible. Like my mother-in-law, my husband's family is from Jamaica. And so going back to the island, they haven't, been back home in a while, especially during COVID, you couldn't. And so just being able to see experiences of the island and being there was so rewarding for her, so those kind of moments are priceless, when you connect the dots across the generations. And my most forward and very like into this technology professors are the ones that have been professors for like 40 years. So my older colleagues are like more enamored by the technology than even my younger ones, which I thought would be different. But they are like sold. They're like, we have waited all our life for this. So it's joy in this journey.
So yeah, I think on that happy note and seeing that we're just a couple minutes at a time, I think this is the moment that I would wrap up the conversation. I want to thank Lucina and Kai. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's great to hear from your testimony and how it is, as you mentioned, being in the trenches, really being innovators of thinking, all right, let's bring this headsets, all this, crazy ideas, and let's make them a reality and make those crazy ideas something that people can live and experience. I think it's invaluable.
Yep.
For those wishing to revisit the conversation, you'll find the full recording on ITIF's YouTube channel, and make sure to keep up with ITIF's latest insights in AR, VR, and other tech policy discussions, and make sure to follow us on social media. Thank you so much again, Lucina and Kai.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day, everyone.